Hi folks, Florida Man here. We are one of the biggest and probably the best of the diplomacy YouTube channels. Today, I'm bringing you an alliance overview focused on one of the most powerful alliances in diplomacy, the Franco-Russian Alliance. We'll discuss how this alliance works, what the pros and cons are, how long it typically lasts, and who it typically benefits most in execution. The parties to the Franco-Russian Alliance are, as the name would suggest, France and Russia. The way it works is simple enough. Two of the corner powers join together to destroy one or more of the powers between them, typically England or Germany, or both. The pros of the alliance for the two principal countries involved are fairly clear. Each gets a strong and often very stable ally, with whom they can conquer the other Western powers, and ultimately any Mediterranean powers that survive into the middle and late game. This alliance formalizes what is often a de facto reality of the late game in diplomacy. If you're playing as France or Russia, and you do well, you'll often find yourself in a position where working with the other would be to your advantage at some point in the game, even if it doesn't happen until near the end. France and Russia are essentially natural allies in the game of diplomacy, much as I would say the same probably of Italy and Germany. In real history, this alliance placed the German military superpower in an extremely difficult position in World War I, and the only reprieve for the Germans was a political revolution in Russia that took them out of the war. In the game of diplomacy, where governments are optimistically more stable than in real life, the alliance is even deadlier. The combination of Russia and France can be absolutely fatal to either the English and or the German players, and it usually is if France and Russia really do come together. This combination is at its weakest in the early game, but even then, it's formidable, as it arguably combines the two most powerful countries on the map into one coalition. While this is not some kind of unbreakable connection, an alliance between France and Russia, once formed, tends to be one of the stronger, more lasting, and again, deadliest alliances in the game. It frequently continues mowing the other powers down until the game is concluded in a draw that will include both powers. Really, the only major weakness is that there's no way to punish betrayal, particularly in the early game, because they're not next to each other in the early game, so if Russia or France starts a fight with Germany and England, and the other doesn't join them, they can be in very hot water. But this isn't much of a weakness most of the time. An intelligent and experienced French or Russian player will not want to alienate the other by making and then breaking such big promises, because in the long run, they should know the other is likely going to be a good friend to have. If the French-Russian alliance springs into action later on in the game, it's even harder to break up, as it will likely meet up at a stalemate line location in Germany, which means that breaking up the alliance tends not to lead to much advancement for either France or Russia, unless the other was thoroughly lulled into lowering their guard. The only other weakness of this alliance is the possibility that you get countered by another alliance that has more units, but that's a weakness of virtually every possible alliance, and it's probably less likely to happen here than in the typical alliance, since this alliance can often be somewhat disguised in the early game as Russia just jumping on opportunistically when the French attack one of their neighbors with the help of the other. The big winners of this alliance are naturally France and Russia. Hard to say which one more, with the third big winner usually being Turkey or, less likely, another Eastern power. The Austrians could be a big winner if Turkey gets eliminated in the East instead of them, but that's not what usually happens. The biggest loser is Germany typically, or sometimes England, depending on what happens in the early game, i.e. which one gets attacked first. The other typical loser is Italy, who almost always loses out when a strong France develops. Overall, I would consider this a strong alliance that many players have employed to great success. Not as many as could have, though, honestly. If anything, this powerful alliance might be somewhat underrated, if only because people try something more focused on their own region, without thinking about how other regions can contribute to their overall success. I hope you enjoyed this alliance overview and found it helpful. If so, I hope you'll like, subscribe, and check out more Florida Man diplomacy videos. And please join me in thanking the folks whose names are now on screen, who have gone above and beyond to support the channel by either contributing to my Patreon or writing subtitles. and feel free to join them in providing that extra support. Patreon link is in the description below. We also appreciate comments, which boost the videos in the algorithm and make it more likely that fellow diplomacy fans will discover Florida Man diplomacy. Until next time, Florida Man out.